Peter Whittall, thank you very much for coming to the SEPA studio today. The Confederation of European Pest Management Agencies, together with SEN, the European Standards Committee, is working on a standard for the pest management industry. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what your role is in the development of this standard.
Indeed. Well, first and foremost, my day job is that I'm the Technical Director of Rentokil worldwide. And as such, I'm very interested in how you create standards and make sure that not just Rentokil, but the industry operates to a professional standard. And that's really what we're trying to achieve through SEN in Europe in particular. The way a European standard is created is that SEN works with the national standards institutions of different European countries and effectively asks them to create the standard and the inputs from which the standard is created. And I sit on what's called a technical mirror group for the British Standards Institution, which means that some of the pest control professionals of the UK bring together a number of ideas which are then brought into the SEN committee. And from a SEN perspective, I'm trying to lead a group of cross-European colleagues as we start to look at what competence might be needed to drive forward and what should be the critical knowledge, the critical skills of a professional pest controller going forward into the future across Europe.
So it's actually the people in the industry who are developing this standard and not some bureaucrats in Brussels.
Absolutely. The key thing is that we look at the scope of what a pest controller does, what is the critical knowledge, the critical skills, the critical abilities and experience a professional needs. And we draw upon the experience of all our members from the various European countries that are contributing to actually write the standard. And it's people who are out there who are doing pest control every day that are writing these things to make sure that it's relevant to them and that they can make sure that what constitutes a quality job is actually what's written into the standard so that we define what a true professional is.
But pest management has been around for a number of years. Why was this standard necessary today?
Well, I think pest control is changing. The old idea of the pest control is the rat man who comes along and just kills your rats, picks up your rats, has changed and has long gone. Pest control now is about how do you protect assets and how do you protect public health, and that the presence of pests has an enormous effect upon allergies, upon the likelihood of disease being spread. And clearly we're very sensitive nowadays on those sorts of things, as we are lucky enough, certainly in the West, to have a very healthy environment. So the importance of trying to get proper things treated means that we have to professionalise our industry. The indiscriminate use of pesticides is clearly something which people no longer want to, indeed it affects the environment, and indeed the indiscriminate use of pesticides can also have a negative impact on our ability to control pests, in that certain species start to develop resistance. So pesticides used sparingly in the correct way to make sure that you effect control is the best way of assuring a good future for us and indeed Europe.
But who will benefit most from this standard once it's in the marketplace and ready for use?
I think there are two main benefactors of this standard. I think first and foremost it's a standard for customers and it's for people who are buying pest control operations. And secondly, it's the pest control industry itself and the people who are willing to invest in making sure that their operators achieve this standard. The customer benefits from, they suddenly have a kite mark, a standard that says if you buy from this operating company, you know that you're getting what you pay for, you know you're achieving a standard, you know you're getting a professional. From the professional companies that apply this standard, again, having that standard means that people will be more willing to look at them as we go forward in terms of buying their services, whether they're big companies or small companies.
Well, that brings me to my next question. Do you actually see this standard delivering benefits to both the small and the large operators?
Absolutely. I think we've got to remember that a standard is a quality mark. It's not an examination, it's nothing like that. It's about can you reassure your customers and the industries and the services that you're providing for that you meet a professional standard. And whether you're a one-man band, whether you're a small and medium enterprise with 5 to 10 employees, or whether you're a Rentokil with several thousand employees, the ability to demonstrate and reassure our customer base that that's the standard we're reaching is very important, and all types will benefit.
But clearly this standard will have a cost attached to it, and will everybody in the market be able to afford that cost?
I think every reputable company that is actually doing what's right in terms of making sure that all members of its staff are competent to go out and deliver and offer services are already doing 90% of what's needed in terms of achieving a standard, because the biggest investment you make is how you train your people, and indeed in terms of making sure that they apply to a standard. And indeed in some cases you may even save money, because by actually operating to a standard you will actually not waste materials, you will use possibly far less materials, because in many cases you don't need to apply pesticides. It will raise the standards, and therefore could potentially mean that people do not have an on-cost in meeting this standard.
So this process has already been going on, as you indicated earlier, but can you give us an idea of the timeline, where we stand today, how long more it will take before it's actually active?
There is a strange misnomer in Europe. People think that because it's European it will take a long time to come together. This just isn't the case with a SEN standard. The whole process is very carefully defined by SEN, and from start to finish it takes 3 years. We've been operating now for just over a year in terms of pulling together the various standards institutions and taking the contributions from each of these. So in about 18 months' time, I envisage that the standard will be ready to be published and ready to be voted on by the member committees.
So, and once that's a fact, will then, in order to enforce the standard, certification be necessary?
I think the ability to claim that you're using to the standard is not about certifying. I think it becomes a code of practice in the first instance. The ability of you to prove to your customer base, however, that you're adopting that standard may require you to show different ways of validating it. And there may be some cost in that, certainly for big companies, but again for littler companies, the ability to demonstrate the records that they keep, the way they do business is comparatively simple. So it will be horses for courses for the various sizes. Will you need certification? I think that may be a step too far. We'll have to see how the standard evolves once it's into Europe and being operated to.
And to conclude, maybe can you give us a look at what you see as issues for the future once this big issue of establishing a standard for the industry has been settled?
I think, as I said earlier, the whole of pest control is changing, and what we're trying to do by introducing a standard is to professionalise our industry, to raise the standards. And why do we want to do that? Well, the most important thing that are emerging now is that we're trying to not just kill things, but to actually protect public health, to protect the assets of our customers, and increasingly to minimise the impact that we have on the environment. And I think once we have a common professional standard, we'll be able to build on those things. And indeed, there are a lot of changes happening in terms of the pest species that are coming into Europe at the moment. We have termites starting to move north from the southern ends of Europe. We see various types of mosquito coming in. So the ability to apply minimal quantities of pesticides to control these and not damage the environment, whilst also ensuring that we don't get some of the nasty diseases being spread, will become critical. And I'm sure that you'll see that happening, and how we move forward with that going into the future.
Thank you very much for coming to Brussels, Peter Whittall.
My pleasure.